Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm JJ Flazanes.
Hey, I'm Doug Sandler.
And today is a very unique episode. It's unique because we are taking a coaching session that happened by accident. I was being interviewed on Jordan Goldrich's show, The Workplace Warrior. Jordan is one of our podcast mastermind clients. He's part of the Ultimate Podcast Mastermind. And as I was listening to the show and getting ready to repurpose it and share it with all of you here on all of the JJ shows, I said to Doug, we could put this on sales training for podcasters also.
Yeah. So as I'm listening to the episode and I'm listening to Jordan talk, and Jordan is an executive coach, so he coaches those that are in the really, really high level of the corporate world, and it's such a tight world. You know, people are really, really high strung and they're really wound pretty tight. And I think what really happens in this episode is Jordan shares some things, and you'll hear it as you get, deeper into the episode. Jordan shares some things that I think that he originally felt uncomfortable with sharing. And as I'm listening to how he's doing this, I'm thinking, man, what a cool episode. Not because Jordan is sharing some things that he wouldn't necessarily share to his executive coaching clients, but because you're seeing like the true self come out. And when you start to see that, you start to understand where podcasting is different than any other media, because you actually have an opportunity to be that true, genuine self, sharing your story, sharing your path, sharing warts and all. And it's really interesting what transpires in this interview. And JJ does a great job of not only walking Jordan through a number of the steps that he needs to continue on in order to be the true, authentic self that he is, but then she actually comes back and she makes the points about why it's important to do this. So I love the episode. I thought it was great. I thought Jordan was at his finest. I didn't see anything wrong with it. I don't see anything unprofessional about it. I saw true authenticity coming out, and I thought it was just great. You did a great job, JJ, also.
Thanks, honey. We're sharing with all of you because what happened. So for those of you in my mastermind, or those of you in the Inner Circle membership, and of course, everybody else who's just listening to the show, you've heard me talk about The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And we work with upper limiting and with The Big Leap in all of the masterminds, including the podcast mastermind, as well as the Inner Circle mastermind, the Emerging Business Builders mastermind. I work with it all over the place because, again, I feel like it's such a great addition to law of attraction and everything else that I'm teaching to help people understand when they want more than they have and why they can't get it or sustain it. And when I was listening to Jordan's show, so we did this recording, and then we had a weekend sales training and marketing workshop that Jordan attended. And he made the announcement during that workshop that he was not going to publish the show. And about 4 days before that workshop, he emailed Doug and I, and he said, "Am I upper limiting if I don't publish the show?" And I said, "Of course you are." And then Doug said, "Yes, don't worry about it, Jordan, just publish the show." And so Doug and I listened to the episode yesterday on the way back from our new home. Can't wait to tell you all about that and the manifestation power about that. Mm-hmm. And so we're listening to it. And your response, Doug, was that Jordan was concerned he didn't sound sure of himself, or that he maybe thought he came off unprofessional or a little too vulnerable. And I know as I'm listening to it, because I'm vulnerable all the time, I'm thinking, what's the problem? What did you think, Doug?
No, I thought exactly as you were saying. What's the problem with that? I think for me, the podcasting world is really an opportunity for you to share who you really are. I mean, your community. We're sharing this on Sales Training for Podcasters because we're sharing with you what we think is essential components and characteristics of a successful person in the podcasting space when it comes to capitalizing on who you are as it relates to selling the services that you have. And why would you ever hide behind your product or service when that is not actually what people are buying? No matter what you are selling through podcasting, you realize that you're taking your podcast community on a journey along with you. And if you are anything other than the authentic, genuine self that you are, you're hiding behind your products and services. And people don't buy products and services, they buy people. They're buying from you. If you have a car and you're going to sell a car and you are not, if you're disingenuine with how you're presenting the car, it's going to be reflected in the fact that you probably aren't going to make that sale, no matter how much that person wants the car. If they don't trust you, they're not going to buy from you. They're going to think, I wonder what he is hiding. I don't ever want anybody to think when they're listening to you and doing your podcast, I don't want them to ever think, what's he getting to? Like, what's his angle? There is no angle. If there is an angle, it's the angle of be the real you, let the real you come out, let your audience fall in love with you. They're going to tell you not only what they want, but they're going to connect with you even deeper because you're being a relatable person when you're sharing warts and all the things that are your flaws. And I thought it was, again, I thought it was a great episode.
And I'm sharing it on all of my shows because, again, it's you guys get to have the bird's eye view of an upper limiting coaching conversation. Jordan didn't mean to go down the path of asking me this question necessarily. He wanted to, and I didn't force it upon him. But I wanted to tell you the story. And I thank you, Jordan, for allowing me to take this episode and share it with my community, because we all have a perception of what our vulnerable levels are. And my guess is a lot of you out there, you're going to listen to this and think, I didn't hear where he was vulnerable. I didn't hear where there was a problem. But each person would have that same experience, because whatever it is for you, other people may not perceive it as being as big or as scary or as hairy of a big deal as you do. And so I wanted to share this episode for that reason, to sort of sit back and really get to see someone who's getting ready to upper limit themselves, who, by the way, had the courage to move through that. And because of that, I want to ask you all to do a few things. If you already listened to the Workplace Warrior, I want you to let Jordan know that you heard the show. And I want you to either congratulate him for having the courage or tell him you heard it. And if you enjoyed it, that you enjoyed it. If you don't listen to Workplace Warrior, one of the things that Doug and I have been coaching him on in terms of being sort of him and stepping into a new sort of brand, one of the titles that came to me months ago that I haven't really pushed him on is the Misunderstood Bully. And when we had a recent mastermind, we asked the rest of the group to vote who liked Workplace Warrior and who liked the Misunderstood Bully. And all hands went up for the Misunderstood Bully. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to change the name of his show. He just might add a second show. But if that resonates with you, if you feel a strong pull when I say that, I would love and appreciate, especially those of you in my community, reach out to Jordan and tell him you're looking forward to the Misunderstood Bully, or you need that because your husband is, or your son is, or you are, or your wife is, or your mother is, or your father is. And it's a frustrating thing to be. So because the power of the community is not unlike anything else out there. And when we can get ourselves reflected back to ourselves from our communities saying, hey, I love that idea and I want what that's going to be about because I need that too. That could not only help us, but that could help him. So if you're interested in Jordan, he's a wonderful man. You can go listen to the Workplace Warrior. If that doesn't resonate with you, Workplace Warrior, for my community, but you might be interested in the Misunderstood Bully, I would love you to reach out to Jordan and tell him that. So whether it be through workplacewarrior.com or on Facebook, or I think he's on Instagram, you could message him in any way. You can send me the message and I'll forward it to Jordan. Okay. To make it easier. But I want to say thank you, Jordan, for allowing us to take this episode and use it as a teaching episode for everybody, not only on all of my shows, but on Sales Training for Podcasters as well. And as Doug said earlier and in the car last night when we were listening to it, he was like, that was great. And I want more of that kind of Jordan.
Well, I listened to the show and I think, it's not that I'm not attracted to the information that Jordan presents to his audience, but I certainly can relate to somebody that is a lot more open and authentic, as opposed to someone that it keeps everything close to the vest and follows a process that's very textbook. Textbook is unrelatable to me, but I can see somebody having some uncomfortableness, if that's a word, somebody being uncomfortable with something that they're saying. He even gets in a point in the interview where he says, I'm not sure I'm going to air this. And I need a moment to what did he say? I need to pause, or I need a moment to think. I don't remember. Do you remember exactly what he said, JJ?
He needed to stop. He didn't even ask me to stop. He just collected himself. Exactly. I think he even said that I just need a moment to collect myself, not because he was overly emotional, but because he really needed to think through it. And I think so many times, I mean, that's like the perfect example.
too often we are in our head and thinking through everything. And I would say, what's the expression sometimes is be sure that brain is engaged before putting mouth in gear. And I would argue that point in the podcasting realm. If you speak, not necessarily from your head, but from your heart, your community will connect with you even deeper and more often. So you're going to enjoy this episode. I know you will.
And that applies also, everybody, to every business, by the way. So yes, podcasting and every other business. Lead with your heart. Enjoy today's episode.
Welcome to the Workplace Warrior Podcast. Today we have a powerful conversation about some things, really two things that impact all people and certainly impact leaders, executives, and successful people. And those are your upper limit, which keeps you from reaching and staying in your zone of genius. Our guest is JJ Flizanes, who happens to be my coach, along with her partner, Doug Sandler. And that's in a program called the Ultimate Podcast Mastermind, which, by the way, I highly recommend. JJ is one of the most direct people I've ever met. She's probably one of the few people who is as direct or perhaps even more direct than I am. And as you probably know, if you've been listening, my specialty is working with strong leaders who sometimes get identified as abrasive. And I was certainly one of those. Most strong leaders like to know what they're talking about and dislike sounding unsure of themselves in front of other people. And for some crazy reason, I made the decision to ask JJ to coach me on my upper limit and zone of genius during our conversation. And trust me, it was not my original intention. This part of the conversation starts somewhere about 30 minutes in. I'm not sure exactly where it is because I recorded this introduction afterwards. And I think you'll really want to listen to the first part because JJ makes some very powerful and important points. So as you will hear, I tell her at one point that I'm not sure I'm going to air this episode. And at another point, I say, stop, I need to collect myself. And while I'm comfortable being transparent and vulnerable in personal conversations, and certainly in coaching conversations, I think one of the reasons that I'm an effective coach is I'm willing to share, what's happened to me and some of the stuff I've been through. This is the first time I've ever considered being vulnerable on a broadcast, and to say nothing of my own podcast. So ultimately, Doug and JJ and several other people convinced me that I'll be serving other leaders who, like myself, can be very direct and perhaps be experienced as abrasive if I decide to take this risk. And I decided to take it. So I certainly invite you to let me know your thoughts and reactions after you listen. A bit more about JJ. JJ calls herself an empowerment strategist. She's the host of several podcasts, including Spirit, Purpose, and Energy, which is a People's Choice Awards nominee. And she is the director of Invisible Fitness, a best-selling author of Fit to Love, How to Get Physically, Emotionally, and Spiritually Fit to Attract the Love of Your Life, and the Invisible Fitness Formula, 5 Secrets to Release Weight and End Body Shame. She's been named Best Personal Trainer in Los Angeles for 2007 by Elite Traveler magazine, and she has been featured in many national magazines, including Shape, Fitness, and Women's Health. She's also appeared on NBC, CBS, Fox, the CW, and KTLA. Welcome, JJ.
Thanks, Jordan. Happy to be here.
Tell our listeners a little bit about how you became interested in helping people build their spirit, purpose, and energy.
Well, let's see. I have always been a highly intuitive and emotionally aware person. I'm an old soul. I studied acting and entertaining when I was younger. So I've been on stages. I've always been that old soul hanging out with the older kids or the adults, looking for depth of conversation, looking for concepts, interested in learning. And as I progressed in my life and just questioning things, I mean, even just church, I was the kid that said, why Are we this religion? Why does this religion do this? Why do they do something different over there? So I always asked why, not completely relentlessly, like I didn't annoy everybody, but if I didn't like the answer, I kept asking. I would never take the because I'm your mother or because I told you so as an answer. I said, that's not an answer. I need a real answer to get behind and to see if I agree or disagree with whatever concept you're telling me. So over time, I've just been interested in how the human experience works and how do we tick? What do we think about? What do we focus on? Why are we here? Just all the questions that you could possibly ask yourself. I've asked myself and searched answers to answer them until I felt complete. Not that the learning is never over, but I've gotten to the place where all of my major questions got answered. And I had a understanding of what I thought life and soul and spirit and God, creator source, and our time on the planet while we're here in this physical form in this lifetime. When I got all the answers that I wanted, it helps to backtrack and understand for me how to be happy, how to get what you want, how to attract better things in your life, how to have a better experience while you're here. So it really becomes the overarching life question of why are we here and how do we enjoy our time while we're here? So that's really the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah. So I am curious, with as direct as you are and as my coach, one of the things I've experienced with you is, as I said, you're extremely direct. And it feels really good to me because that's how my family was. One of the stories I tell in my book, pardon my listeners for having to hear this again, is how I'm 12 years old and I'm sitting at the kitchen table and I decide to express a political opinion. And my uncle, the psychiatrist, looks at me and goes, "Jordan, you're a moron." And I didn't for one second think that Seymour thought I was a moron. That was just my family's way of having said, you haven't thought this through. So I'm just curious, both in terms of your professional work and your coaching work, how do people take your very direct personality?
Well, I have raving, committed fans, and I've got people who don't like me at all. So it's one of life's greatest lessons as an entrepreneur to really understand that your business will challenge you like nothing else. It will ask you to grow in ways you're not ready for. And if you have resilience and a deep enough passion and a commitment to what you're doing in the world, you learn those lessons. And one of the things about being a speaker or a podcaster or a presenter or a public figure in any way is that you're going to get people who hate you. And what you need to know, which I'm sure you teach your people too, is that it's not about you. None of what anyone else's opinion is of me is actually about me. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not direct. I'm direct. But when I know that I got a negative review of someone who's listened to my show and I've never met them, I've never had a conversation with them, I don't know them personally, what I know is that I have said something so laser specific that has tickled a wound that you have, that has upset you so deeply. I actually like that because I'm a catalyst. I have people who will tell me they started listening to my show and they'll immediately say, oh, no, I can't listen to this. I did not attract this. I did not ask for this. And then they'll get curious and then they'll start listening. And then they'll binge listen and they'll get over it and they'll really take the lessons and they'll empower their lives and they'll see things change and they'll tell me, yeah, I couldn't take you at first because you were a little too direct for me. But that's, we share a lot of Sagittarius planets, you and I, as well as some East Coast blood. And if people know me and when I'm on stage or when I'm in person or on video, most of the time I think energetically you can feel me. You can feel my heart. So I'm not doing it to be right. I'm doing it because I don't care. Me being right doesn't help you unless you do something about it. Right. So it's really about lasering in on, let's just get on with it already. Like enough story, enough excuses, enough blocks. We're here for a limited time. And I'm not trying to be scarcity minded here. Just like really, like, would you wake up one day and say, I have the power to create my own reality? How am I doing? And if you're not doing what you want to be doing, well, that's nobody else's fault because you're the creator of your own reality. So at this point, you have a choice every day and there's no right way and there's no wrong way and no one's bad or good or to blame. But it's that understanding that why waste time,
I agree. And I'm curious, if you've worked with senior executives in corporations as well as some of the individuals that you've worked with.
So I did a lot of corporate work a couple of years ago, or it's a couple of years ago. Life goes on and you think it's a couple of years, and it's actually been like 15 years. So 15 years ago, I did a lot of corporate work with a company that was mostly predominantly men. And what was really fun about that was, besides the fact that I'll never do it again for those individual people because they were exhausting, but I really could connect with, and again, they appreciated my directness. They appreciated not beating around the bush. They appreciated me making a joke about the difference between men and women, and really seeing men in a different way. So, I come from a background, and I come from a point of view that masculine and feminine is in all of us. And there's a reason why we have these different hormones and these different pathways in our brain and our different ways of being. It's all part of evolution, and it's very necessary. And what we've come to in our society, I believe, is too much of a neutralizing of both of that. And I know you do agree with that because you want to talk about the feminizing of leadership. And I was totally on board with that, because I agree with you. We have to not villainize the masculine, but we also have to not be afraid of the feminine power that's within all of us. So when I'm a very adaptable trainer, and I'm a very adaptable coach. I say things to you, Jordan, because you can handle it. And because I know some of the people you've trained with in the past, I know some of the things that you've done. I understand sort of the, get to it, get on with it kind of attitude. And so I'm not going to give you fluff. But for someone else who comes to the table who might need more of that, I've gone from teaching power of positive thinking to a company, to Verizon, and teaching them how to see possibility and how to have more compassion. But I've also lit the fire under the butts of Southern California Edison and all of those, outdoor workers, those men who don't take care of themselves, then get upset when they have to be on disability because something bad happened to their health.
Sure.
So it's about the flexibility, the vulnerability, the authenticity, and then know your audience.
Yeah. And the reason I want you on the show is because I think that people who are extremely direct are really important for leadership these days. We live in crazy times, complex times. You need people who don't get tired, who see the goal, and they keep pushing. And the leadership conversation, to me, I see it as poles of hard power, soft power. You could also call it feminine, masculine. And I completely agree with you. I love what you said about it's in all of us and we need both. The whole concept of feminizing leadership really came about around perceiving that it was a observation about what's going on in the leadership literature, which was really, really emphasizing soft power and de-emphasizing hard power. And by the way, I should mention it, I was planning on doing a workshop on feminizing leadership. And one of my mentors said to me, don't do it because you're a 68-year-old man and you're going to get shot down. And he also said that feminizing leadership in our culture today, while you don't mean it that way, Jordan, it could be taken as a put down of leadership, as feminizing leadership. So we live in very interesting times where you really can't talk about a whole lot of stuff without being extremely, extremely careful.
Well, I disagree with him completely because I think it's needed. I think that, and I'll do it with you, Jordan, or I'll do it instead of you. I'm about to move into, because I agree with you, because women, okay, here's the bottom line, right? We have our first, and I'm sure you've talked about this on your show. We have that first stage kind of man that was spine, but no heart, the Archie Bunker, right? The no heart, no conscious, just power. And Edith being what represented feminine at that time, which was subservient. Okay. Not a good look. Then we switched that out on second stage and we went women with spines and men with hearts. That was the 70s. Okay. Right. But men lacked spines because, God forbid, I have a spine and a heart. Well, third stage is combining both of those, where everybody has a spine and everybody has a heart, but we take the masculine and feminine energies and we understand them and their uses and their necessity. And I'm about to move into, what came up for me at my last mastermind meeting in my other group was the need, because I'm around a bunch of controlling women, and I love them. And I'm one of them, right? The rescuer, control freak, recovering triple A, not double A, triple A type women. But I'm about ready to move into sacred feminine work. Sacred feminine work is diving deep into the abyss of the power of the woman that most Western women have shame about. And I think when a woman understands her power and a man respects her power and isn't afraid of it, and vice versa, when a woman can respect and respond to a man's power, because I'll tell you, a woman can respond to it when you need to protect her, or when you need to go out and hunt the deer so that you can, make dinner tonight. Those things are revered. It's when women are afraid of men because the power gets misused and there's a lack of trust and a lack of safety. So we have all this convoluted crap that's been going on in masculine and feminine for a long time. And so everyone's walking on eggshells. And what happens is men lose their purpose and women seem to want to control men so they feel safe. And those two things are never going to work for anybody long term. We are lacking heart and spine with full-on masculinity and honoring masculine without women being threatened, and with women being able to blossom and step into their full power without men being afraid of that and trying to repress that also.
Yeah. Have you had any recent experience with women in leadership in large companies where you've had an opportunity to address this kind of stuff?
I haven't been doing as much corporate work in the last few years. I address all of this on my show. So I think for a lot of the strong women that I attract that are part of my groups that come to my events, I think they resonate with that. I have a very high regard for masculine energy that's, again, emotionally intelligent, that's conscious, that's heart-centered and heart-opened, and that isn't a power, someone trying to get power or take power from somebody, from a abundance of power, not a scarcity, not a one-upping, not a control, not a power struggle between sexes or between people. So I think that's why I attract the women that I attract to me, who listen to me on the show. And I have men, they very quietly, like when Doug came on the scene, they were like, "Oh, Doug." They started writing to me on the podcast because they heard Doug. And while they may or may not love Doug, because again, Doug kind of straddles that line of he's very open-hearted and he's much more in that feminine sometimes, even though he can be that masculine, but that isn't him. And that's never been him. And that's part of who he is as an entertainer and a performer and a personality and a trainer. So I think I attract the women that recognize that they have power they're not using, but don't want to blame everybody else for it.
Yeah. Interesting. Just so that everybody who's listening knows, Doug is Doug Sandler, and he has a company called Turnkey Podcast. And I originally met Doug through another program I was in on how to do podcasts, and decided to work with Doug. And Doug and JJ worked together on the Ultimate Podcast Mastermind and monetizing your podcast, etc. And so it's very interesting to have the two of them coaching me, because JJ's telling me what to do, and Doug is, I think, actually, the two of you just remind me of my family. It's really an interesting conversation, but very, very powerful stuff. And I highly recommend them. Tell people a little bit about that program and also your other program.
So we started the Ultimate Podcast Mastermind because, quite honestly, Jordan, I kept seeing people like you. And I didn't know you at the time, but I had heard your name and I had done your voiceover for your show.
That's right.
Right? Several times, several rewrites. So I had people like you, people like Susan and Emily, and people that were entering into really big financial commitments in podcasting. And again, let me repeat this, I never thought I'd be a podcast coach. Okay. Ever. Was never an intention. I was a podcaster, but time and time again, being with other podcasters, being with people who wanted to podcast and listening to results, and then knowing what I was experiencing, I was watching people who wanted what I had already achieved go to someone who hadn't achieved it and hope that they could help them achieve it. And I was in the sidelines going, I could help her. I can help her. Like, that person hasn't done what she wants to do. I have what you want. I can help you. And so it literally became out of necessity. Finally, I couldn't stand it any longer. I'm like, let me help you. because this is a journey and it's different than regular marketing. It's different than advertising. Podcasting is a unique, wonderful opportunity to make a real heartfelt connection with somebody. It's intimate, it's vulnerable, and people can smell BS from a mile away. You have 10 seconds to connect with them or you don't. And you cannot pick your audience. You cannot decide to run an ad to get podcasts to get the exact right people in your audience. It doesn't work like that. And when, again, my business has been exploding for years in a good way and going more and more. And as I'm on this journey, I know I can help others. And that's how it happened. Again, Doug fought me every step of the way. He didn't want to do it because he didn't want to do it. And he'd seen what other people had done and said, I don't want to do that. And I said, but we have to, because people are struggling and they start a podcast and then they don't make any money and then they quit because they don't know how to make any money. And that doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. So what's the secret?
Well, there isn't a secret. I mean, it's about like, there's not one secret.
What are the secrets?
Well, the secret is, first of all, do a show you want to listen to.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, be authentic, be real, and be yourself. Like, one of our podcast members has sort of been on hiatus health-wise, and she just literally returned today. And we talked about like what she's going to do when she picks up her show again. And I said, I want you to take a week and listen to, I sent her a bunch of my shows. I said, I want you to like, to find that cross section of your journey and what helps you, and then sharing that with others.
Yes.
Because the people who are going to be attracted to you are the ones that are going to be kind of like you, or they're going to want what you have, or they're going to want something similar, or they've experienced the same things you've experienced. And so they want you to lead them down the path that you've already gone down. And I think too many times we approach podcasting from this, oh, I'm going to go and we hear about certain people's successes and we think, I'm going to go make a lot of money real quick. I'm going to be the next big sensation. And it's about the staying power. I don't want to work with any more beginners, not because beginners are bad, but I want someone who's committed to podcasting, committed to a message, who enjoys this process, enjoys having conversations, sharing wisdom, getting excited, helping people. That's who I want to work with, because if you are committed to a bigger message and a bigger journey, the money will come. I promise you, we'll find a way to make money. Doug is about to find out how to make money on his Mustang show, which he did as a complete like, hey, I love my Mustang. I'm going to have a Mustang show. And all of a sudden, with his first call to action, which has taken 18 months, by the way, Jordan, 18 months, he finally put out a call to action. All of a sudden, like 100, 200 people joining his Facebook group. They all want to talk. They all want to be together. And he's having all this amazing engagement, but it's taken him this long because he doesn't need to make any money from it. But it's like, how do I do this? I love the show. I love the subject. The people are cool. This is really fun. Now, how do I make money? And when you follow that in a strategic way. So here's the next step. It's about strategy in everything you do, in podcasting, in marketing, in coaching, in healing, in stretching yourself and finding what your zone of genius is. Does this light me up? What could you do all day long, every day, not get tired, and never need to get paid for it in a perfect world? And mine is, of course, is teaching and helping and sharing and healing and helping people stretch and see their lives in a bigger way, in a better way, in whatever floats your boat. I mean, not that everybody needs to be, having the same goals, of course, but so I think when we look at what's the secret of podcasting, it's the same thing that's the secret of life. If you're having a good time and you're doing what you love, you'll figure it out if you're paying attention. And if you use a little strategy, ask for help when you need it, know that you're on a growth path always. And what you don't know, what you don't know. So find someone to mentor or someone to be a mentor to you, and then get involved and, enjoy the ride.
Well, great. I want to take a very brief break, but when we come back, I want to ask you about zone of genius and a few other issues like that, because those have been really powerful for me. So I want to remind everyone that the sponsor of the Workplace Warrior podcast is Workplace Warrior Incorporated, which is a consulting firm that provides executive coaching and leadership development. And if you are a senior or a developing leader who'd like to discuss how to drive results without damaging relationships, you can get in touch with me for a complimentary conversation at jordan@jordangoldrich.com. Also, if you're enjoying this conversation, please rate us on Apple or on your favorite platform. So back to our conversation. One of the books that you recommended to me was a book called The Big Leap. Now, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've been doing therapy. I've been in psychoanalysis. I've been in all kinds of personal growth stuff. And my experience has been that books about how I can grow and, reach my higher levels are pretty corny and I don't like them. And all of a sudden I realized, I'm paying these people to help me do my podcast and build my business and all of that. Why don't I read the book she gave me? And I have been absolutely shocked that it is not what I was expecting kind of was a new agey kind of, how to grow and, meet the universe kind of book. I don't know what to say, but be that as it may. And it's not. So there were a number of concepts in there. The one that really, really got me was the concept of upper limit. And so as a therapist, I understand that we have all kinds of conversation that goes on in our head. And I've picked up referring to it as gremlin. The gremlin is telling you, you're doing it wrong. You should do it like this. Don't do that. Do this, do the other thing. And for people who are not severely abused, the gremlin is actually on your side and helpful. It's just wrong. And it never occurred to me until I read this book that we all have been conditioned to have an upper limit. Like you're not supposed to feel better than this, and you're not supposed to get more successful than this. And that was partly what got me to want to have you on the podcast. So I'd like for you to, whether you're a top executive or you are doing anything else, the chances are pretty good that when you're too successful or more successful than your unconscious upper limit tells you to be, that you do things to mess it up. So say a little bit about that. What's been your experience?
I read the book the first time in 2018 or from 2017 to 2018. And I will say that my marriage was sort of it was like ending at the time. I was starting my first live event from the podcast. So I was already in transition. And when I was reading it, I wasn't present. So I wasn't getting the benefit from it. I knew that it must be a great book. A lot of people had talked about it. I had it, I read it, and I don't remember what it was. I think it was just that Gay Hendricks and Katie, they live in Ojai, where Doug and I just bought a house. And our dear friend, Michael Neely, has been friends with them since, they were at the birth of his son. And we were talking about different podcast guests. And I was like, oh, sure, I'll have Gay Hendricks on the show. And I thought, I have The Big Leap. Let me go back and read it. And we'll do a show about The Big Leap. And now I'm in a relationship with Doug. And we are all about growth and looking at ourselves and getting to the next level. And so we take it section by section and we're using it on ourselves. In fact, in my Inner Circle podcast, which is a paid membership and paid podcast, we did 4 episodes, episode 9, 10, 11, and 12, because we took sections of the book and literally used ourselves as guinea pigs to self-identify where our upper limits were and what our beliefs that were holding us back and how we could overcome that. So it was us literally working it out on the show for my members. And at that time, that book was perfectly timed for me to use as the cross section. So I teach law of attraction. And basically all that means is that you as a person have a frequency all day long, every day. It changes from subject to subject. If you're happy or sad or worried or whatever, that's a frequency. And you like attracts like. So whatever you think or feel about something is what you expect, and therefore what you get. It's pretty simple. It's physics. It's actually quantum physics. It's science. So when we talk about, people want to dumb down law of attraction to like vision boards and affirmations, which is totally not the point. But there are some like limits to law of attraction. In some people think, well, am I just supposed to be happy? Is that the goal? Like just be happy? Like, I don't understand. How do I be happy all the time? And then how do I sustain that? But when I read The Big Leap, I realized that it was the container of which really could help you transcend your life to the next level, and why we don't. The reason why most people can't sustain a level of happiness, excitement, joy, freedom, love long enough to attract the things that you want is because you do not know how to hold a bigger container. We have a temperature. It's like a temperature gauge. You are used to it being on 100 degrees or whatever. let's say 70 degrees. So if you all of a sudden say, I want more than what I'm used to, you don't have the skills to hold more. Because what happens is all those gremlins that you mentioned, or the subconscious beliefs or patternings or energetic blueprints from our parents or messages from the world, come into play. And then we talk ourselves out of it and we sabotage because we don't know how to expand our energy, deepen our trust, and allow more in. And so I put the big leap in conjunction with law of attraction to really be able to show that this is growth, people. This is what you want when you get to the next level. If you see this, this is the indicator that you don't feel worthy enough for the next. You don't know, you think that it's going to cost you more time. It's going to overwhelm you. It's going to bring a bigger burden. It's going to mean someone abandons you. There are many different beliefs. Gay puts it in 4 limiting beliefs. And he usually says that everyone has at least 1 or 2, sometimes 3, and, seldomly, but sometimes all 4 of these beliefs. I think I identified 2 that were pretty strong within me. But when you can identify that, then when it happens, it's what you do next about it versus like keep bumping up against that next level and wonder why can't I break through this financial ceiling, or why can't I get to the next job, or why can't I have a better relationship? And basically this framework of the Big Leap can provide that.
Yeah. What really amazed me as I read it is he's a psychotherapist, and there was no mention of the law of attraction in the book. And there were some great examples of people, and he was coaching them, but it sounded like therapy to me. And, so I'm going to take a small risk here, or a large risk here, which is you're my coach. I'm going to tell you where I am on figuring out what my zone of genius is. And so what the zone of genius is, as I understand it, and correct me if I don't have it correctly, is where you are at your best, what you absolutely love to do. And I don't think you have to be better than anyone else at, but you are really among the top in the world at doing.
Well, I want to correct that a little bit. Okay, I want to massage it because it's not about that because when you said like top in the world, your zone of genius is your life story, your life experience, and what you are passionate about doing, because it's yours. Like nobody can, like there are a million coaches, but a lot of us have different points of view, different life experiences, different passions, different ways of working. And no one can take that away from you because it's yours. And it makes you an expert in providing the kind of coaching that you do because of your experience. It's not about a test that you take to beat out somebody else or someone giving you validation. It's literally your zone of genius because it's what you were born to do. And your life path has prepared you for that.
Much better said than I said it. So I just want to remind everybody that I've been assigned to read this book, and this is the first conversation I'm having with my coach on my understanding of this stuff. So you're hearing me get coached a little bit, or a lot. I don't know. Anyway, so up until this point, the first time I went through this and I talked about my zone of genius, it was, as an executive coach or as a speaker. And you said to me, you don't understand it, go back and read the book. And so you've gotten to know me over the last couple of months. Let me tell you what I think my zone of genius is and see what you think. What I think my zone of genius is that when I talk to people, and it's whether I'm as a coach or just as a person, and I haven't quite figured out how to say this yet, but people tell me stuff they would not tell anybody else about themselves. And it's for the purpose of healing and growing. And what I find is that I think that my zone of genius is about having conversations with people where they feel safe enough and challenged enough at the same time to really say the stuff that they haven't either been saying to themselves or to somebody else, and do it in what feels like a safe environment. What is that? Does that sound like me to you?
Well, so I would have to ask some follow-up questions, which is why I gave you the sheets. Yes, Jordan, I sent Jordan the Big Leap worksheets, which I will say, by the way, when I interviewed Gay the first time, he's been on the show twice, when I interviewed him the first time about the Big Leap, and I told him that I created this worksheet, he's like, oh, you should send that to me. I'm like, it's your book. You can get your assistant to, all I did was take sections out of the book and put it on a piece of paper. It wasn't a big deal. But when I sent it to you to do, and you sent it back so fast, And I started to read. I'm like, he didn't read the book. He's just answering these questions. So I knew you hadn't read the book because you answered it too fast and you weren't using the language out of the book. So now we're here and you're reading the book, and
Right.
you. So I would need to ask some follow-up questions without going too down the rabbit hole here. And maybe we'll do a second show and follow up after you finish the book and after we've identified this and see how your business or podcast may change. I have a very strong suspicion that something, again, this is the intuitive part of me. This is how I saw you light up when you talked about the masculine stuff. It's why you're doing a show about workplace warrior. There's you want to defend and make right and honor masculine energy. And I think I know that your other coach said, don't do that because you're too old and you're going to get a shitstorm basically. Okay, fine. And I'd say to you, so when are you going to do it? Like, are you just going to let it go? Or aren't you? I feel like you're holding the torch, like because of your demeanor, because of the way you show up, because of your professionalism, because of your education, you can say that. And I think it can be said in such an eloquent way that isn't offensive. And so what if it's controversial? People need to hear, men need to hear, women need to heal. Everybody needs to heal. Okay. We got too much crap going on and somebody needs to hold the light at the end of the tunnel saying, here, follow me. We don't have to do it the way we did it before, but the way that we're going isn't helping us as men, as leaders, as powerful people really live in our brilliance and live in our zone of genius and honor that within each other. So I think that when you mentioned that the first time, I was so excited. I thought that was the best thing. And then when you shrunk in about it, and I understand why, but that's where the upper limit comes in of being worried, of saying, is it going to cause me pain? Is it going to get me a bad reputation? I'll just stay safe in my little box. And I can't answer that for you, whether or not the call to do that is greater than when I step into sacred feminine. I mean, I don't even know what's going to happen, but I fear in one way that some people will reject it because it's weird and it's scary. And I also know that some people will embrace it and want more. So my experience with you so far, Jordan, is that I think that there is a place for that conversation or something that really lights you up. Yes, you are good at listening and at providing feedback and reflecting back and having a gentle spirit, yet being intelligent and direct with love. But I'd love to see whatever gets you up in the middle of the night. What legacy do you want to leave? What's the biggest message that you have for your life that you've learned, that if you had to boil it down to one thing, what would you tell people? This is what you need to understand.
I actually, let me tell you what comes up for that. What comes up for that is that it's important to cultivate compassion for people that your brain is telling you don't deserve it.
Perfect. Great. And then the reasons why, and then all the tools that you have to teach people how to do that.
Right. So that is more where I am than I'm really about, I just got ticked off about the way men are being talked about. Not that they don't deserve it. Not that
some do, but not everybody.
Well, but there definitely has been, I grew up in a Jewish family in New York, and I had family who were, my great grandparents were killed in the Holocaust or before the Holocaust. And I also grew up in a city housing project, which was highly diverse, I guess would be the term that you would use these days. And so there's a big part of me that really believes that the system controls a lot of stuff. And then on the other hand, there's a big part of me that believes exactly what you say. You're in control. It's not what other people do. And I have both of those messages in my head. And so what do you think about that?
I think you need to meditate. And I think you have to, if you don't feel like you're an intuitive person, I think you need to exercise a greater depth of intuition and trust. And here's what I'll tell you, be super uncomfortably honest with yourself.
Well, I'm being super uncomfortably honest here.
Okay. All right. Well, then we're really close.
And between you and me, I haven't 100% decided whether this is actually going to get aired. So I have to listen to it afterwards.
Oh, no. Don't be upper limiting now. I bet you this episode will endear people to you in a way that haven't yet because of the vulnerability that you're putting out there. I have bared my soul on my show. And I have people who've been listening for 6 years. They are avid fans and they're part of my soul spiritual family. I mean, it is a close-knit group of people. I've literally created my own economy with my show because of the way I show up. And again, I'm not for everybody, just like you're not for everybody. But you know what? You and I are the right people for the right people. And it's to each his own. We are going to share messages with the people who need to hear what we have to say. And the ones that don't will move on.
I hear you.
I challenge you to show up in a vulnerable way on your show as a workplace warrior, to show your heart and to let this episode air freely so people hear this, because isn't it what you do in coaching? Isn't this what you help other people do in ways, right? Like you're taking them through a process, which is helping them be honest, learn how to have compassion for themselves, to create space and accountability to take action to the next thing. We're just doing what you do for others. We're just doing it for you right now.
This is true. This is true. And that is one of the advantages. It is one of the advantages. By the way, I think right. I gotta collect myself.
No, you don't. Just be wild. Let loose, Jordan. When in life are you gonna just let loose? Just be free. Feel free.
Yeah. Okay, let's go back. Where was I? So, yeah, this is not an easy thing for me. And I do it really, really well on an individual basis. Talk about my own vulnerability, but with all the people who are talking about cancel culture this year, these days, it's pretty scary stuff.
Like I said, when we use outside circumstances to dictate how we show up, we will always be a victim to circumstances.
Yes.
And if your life is calling you to break free of other people's beliefs, other people's ideas, other people's opinions, this would be the time to be the bravest warrior of all and say, I'm just going to shine my light and be who I am, trusting that the right people will show up and things will unfold the way that it needs to. That in itself, that trust is one of the scariest things most people have a hard time with, because you've been conditioned to do it a certain way, or the heritage, the parenting, the religion, the politics, whatever. We look outside of ourselves all the time to be guided. And I'm going to tell you right now, and I'm sure you know this inside of you, whether you know it intellectually or not, the only guidance you need is your connection to whatever source or God or whatever spirit or universe or the clouds or the sun. I don't care. Whatever. That is your only guidance that you need to be who you are, you incarnated in this lifetime for a reason. And let's get on with it already. And again, it's a process. I break through upper limits all the time, but I have them is the point, right? Yes. I have them, that every new level presents a new level, and I'm afraid of my own power. If you think me being direct or me being like this is like the end game, it's not. This is just what I'm comfortable with. Like with the next level gets even more uncomfortable. And the upper limit belief would be that my love language is quality time. So I have learned how to behave in ways to keep people close to me. I stayed in a marriage the right perfect amount of time, but I took too much responsibility to change that relationship or to try to fix myself, to try to come up with solutions. But I gave myself more responsibility than I needed to. And I upper limited in the way of thinking. But if I used to say to myself, I knew it, I only grow as far as I know he'll accept. The minute Doug and I got together, my wings got to spread. I got to feel what it was like to open to and he encourages it beyond anyone in my life has ever encouraged it. Yeah. And it's only because of that permission and that support that I've allowed myself to venture into this. And I know that you have that support, and I hope we're that support for you to say whatever it is that your deepest calling, we support it.
Well, I appreciate that, and very, very powerful. I love what you're saying. I think it's really, really critical for whether you're an executive, a male executive, a female executive, or whatever it is that you're doing. It's really, really critical to get in touch with your own spirit, with your own, what Simon Sinek calls your why, and to develop the ability and the strength and the courage to live with it. So thank you.
That's what I'm here to do. It's my zone of genius, be here to inspire empowerment in others, and empowerment within you, not in relationship to anyone except you.
Sounds good. As we wind down, are there any final thoughts you would have for our listeners?
Well, depending on who's listening, and if you're still listening to me at this point, I guess with the whole understanding of workplace warrior and, being in the space of being a leader, Doug and I interviewed Tom Ziegler yesterday, Zig Ziglar's son. And one of the things that he brought up, which I thought was really poignant, was about, and I mentioned it here today, which is about leadership with vulnerability. And I know that you talked about compassion, and I teach all kinds of things. I teach an astrology course. Why? Because it's a way for people to be compassionate to others and why they act the way they do and why they're different than you and all the different ways that they show up. So all the tools I teach are all about also self-compassion and compassion for others. Now, if you're in a leadership position, it's what I think is power. Let's talk about power for a second. My last words of the day will be that power is not about force. Power is about alignment and energy that's based in heart, authenticity, and the greatest pure, again, love, white light, whatever you want to call it, like just like why you're here. Like if you felt like an angel or a powerful being, or if you were a superhero, it's that like greatest good energy. That is what power is. And also taking responsibility for when you don't show up like that, and not blaming anybody else or forcing anybody else, and learning to just be who you are at the fullest, again, without conditions, and take the responsibility at every step of the path to look at yourself and to claim and be responsible for how you show up and what you can do about it. And if you do that, there is nothing in life you cannot be or do or have.
Great. So if people wanted to have more communication with you or wanted to experience your coaching or your teaching, how could they do that?
Well, if you're still sort of checking me out and you think, I don't know about this chick, you can just go. I have many podcasts, like many podcasts. So you can go to jjflazanes.com/podcast. And I'm giving that to you because spirit, purpose, and energy may not be the right show for you. Maybe Fit to Love is, or nutrition and alternative medicine, or health and wealth. Some of them have the same content, but it's the entry point that I'm interested in, what you're attracted to. I also have a show called Women, Men, and Relationships. If you're a podcaster, Doug and I have sales training for podcasters. And we do get a little personal. And we definitely talk about upper limits because, again, how you show up in business and how you attract higher end clients and how you attract greater sales is about expanding who you are and allowing in more. You can't ask for $1 million if you've never done it before and if you don't feel like you're worthy of it. So jjflazanes.com/podcast is the way you can just type in my name in wherever you get podcasts, and all my shows will come. But if you're really seriously moved, like you're like, okay, I need some help right now, I do have a 2-session starter pack. You can go to jjflazanes.com/work-with-JJ. And that would be a place it's just 2 sessions. So there's like an assessment consultation and then all the things you need to do. And then we follow up and see if you did them. And if you didn't, why, and what your next steps would be. So again, that's just for any of you that feel really compelled to get some help, personal help right now, jjflazanes.com/work-with-JJ. Otherwise, please check out my podcast. You listen to this podcast with Jordan, so you like podcasts. So see what looks interesting to you. And I'd love to have you in the community.
Well, JJ, I thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. And I have really appreciated it, although I have admitted that being coached by you is definitely a challenge. And I recommend you to everyone. So thank you.
Well, hold on. You just said being coached by me is a challenge, and then you recommend. That didn't sound like, can we put a sentence in between there?
It's great to be challenged.
Oh.
If you want to grow, you got to be challenged.
So you enjoy the challenge?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are times it makes me really, really uncomfortable. But that's, that's what a warrior does. A warrior goes where it's uncomfortable. And you can't accomplish anything unless you're willing to be uncomfortable.
True words.
Yes. So let me just remind everyone that the Workplace Warrior podcast is sponsored by Workplace Warrior Incorporated. And if you are an executive or a leader who wants to learn more about driving results without damaging relationships, you can connect with me directly at jordan@jordangoldrich.com. And again, please rate us on Apple or your favorite platform. You're invited to join us every week for a challenging conversation perhaps not as challenging as this one was. And it's about driving results without damaging relationships. So thank you, and until next week.